Oh, what's up fellow nerds? I'm your host Dr. McKay and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be my first what if scenario set in the Stargate universe. My what if is what if the Lanteans won the war with the Wraith and lived on past their evacuation of Atlantis. This what if will be completely my own take on the events using what we know of the canon, making changes I think will fit into my narrative. This what if is also inspired by a conversation I had with Ethan on my breakdown of the Lantean Wraith War, so shout out to Ethan for sharing his comments and thoughts on this topic. But before we get started, if you like the content, please feel free to like, comment and subscribe for more. And with that said, let's go. To start, I just want to make a few rules that I have to follow for this scenario. Number one is I can't make up completely new technology for the Lanteans, as I have to use what they had at the time that we know of. Number two, the events leading up to the war are the same. The changes I make will take place after the initial encounter with the Wraith that started the war. And three, for the sake of this breakdown, I won't bring in any of the Lanteans' strong allies, like the Asgard or the Nox, as the complications with the actual timeline of the four great races is still up for debate, and I won't be going down that rabbit hole today. So for the premise of this what if, the Lanteans are alone with only the human worlds in the Pegasus Galaxy as allies. And lastly, I won't use any future knowledge for my advantage. The events will unfold naturally as my what if story unfolds. So with these constraints, let's begin. Our what if begins just over 10,000 years ago, as the Wraith begin their push out into the galaxy from their corner of it. And just like in the timeline, they begin to absorb human worlds and begin culling humans as food. The Wraith then soon attack Lantean-held worlds, and many battles would break out, going the same way it does in the main timeline. The Wraith would use their overwhelming numbers on the Lanteans' fleets and force the Lanteans to retreat back to their key strong worlds, with the Wraith claiming the abandoned worlds. Now this is where I begin to diverge from the canon timeline. With the first major battle lost to the Wraith, the Lanteans hold an emergency High Council meeting to discuss the new threat. In this meeting, the council appoint the captain of the Aurora as fleet commander and is put in charge of all the military operations of the Lanteans' fleet. He then reorganizes the Lantean society towards a more militaristic stance. Let me try that one more time. He then reorganizes the Lantean society towards a more militaristic stance. The council also recognizes that the Wraith's technology matches their own in terms of combat strength, and that they have superior numbers, and immediately forms a science council to begin developing new technologies and defenses led by the ambitious scientist Janus. This immediate realization to the Wraith's threat mobilizes the Lanteans far sooner than before, while also putting them in a militaristic mindset. The next few months see the Lanteans' fleet set up defensive postures over their key worlds of ship production and logistics, strengthening their numbers against Wraith attacks. And though the Lanteans lose their minor outlying worlds and colonies to the Wraith, they maintain their defenses of their key weapons and ship construction facilities in the first years of the war. The Lanteans, with the suggestion of Janus, also begin using cloaked jumpers to spy on the Wraith-controlled worlds and Wraith fleet movements, and begin a series of intel gathering operations for Janus and the fleet commander. In the following years, the war enters a stalemate, with the Wraith constantly attacking the Lanteans' key worlds, but with the Lanteans' determination on defense as the key tactic, the Lanteans hold the space around these worlds, and thanks to the Lanteans' reorganization to the manufacturing and production of war material, the Lanteans begin pumping out new ships and drone weapons, increasing the Lanteans' fleet size and weapons reserves. This increase in the Lanteans' forces, and with their defense posture over their key worlds, The Wraith tactics of overwhelming the Lanteans begins to falter as the Lanteans continue to destroy the Wraith's waves of attacks, never breaking their defensive formations. The Wraith, seeing the Lanteans focused only on defense, begin changing their tactics to hit and run, trying to play on the Lanteans' overconfidence in their technology to try and lure out the Lanteans away from their key worlds. But the Lanteans see through this tactic and remain in their defensive posture, and with this move, the Wraith never get a hold of the ZPMs and never set up their cloning and ship-grown facilities to overwhelm the Lanteans, like they did in the canon timeline. This change paves the way to the Lanteans' offensive later on. So we are now a decade into the war, and the Lanteans have held the line against the Wraith, and have produced enough ships to double their numbers. And with Janus and the Science Council gathering intel on the Wraith's society and technology, 3 projects are put forward to the Lantean High Council. The first project is to exploit the organic nature of the Wraith's technology. This project would see the Lanteans begin work on microscopic nanites as a possible weapon to be used against the Wraith, and was set up on the planet Asurus, one of their key stronghold worlds. The next project is to create another form of power to replace or supplement the ZPMs in their facilities and ships, as the need for more ZPMs was high, and so Project Arcturus was started on the planet Duranda with the aid of the local human population, who have developed advanced energy weapons and wanted to share them with the Lanteans. And the last project was devised by Janus. He wanted to create a device that would prevent the Wraith from using their hyperdrives, stranding the Wraith where they are in space, effectively stopping the Wraith spreading throughout the galaxy. All 3 projects would be greenlit by the Lantean High Council that were eager to begin an offensive campaign against the Wraith, after years of being on the defense, and with that defense holding strong, the Lanteans would take their time with each project, and so another 10 years of a stalemate goes by with the Wraith, engaging in various skirmishes with mixed victories, with the Wraith gaining more human worlds. But as the Lanteans' intelligence campaign has continued, many worlds were evacuated through the Stargate to Lantean key worlds for safety before the Wraith even arrived, with little to no loss to the Lantean fleet. And as this trend kept happening, the Wraith began to focus their hatred more and more, and began putting all of their resources into building up their fleets to attack one of the Lanteans' key shipbuilding worlds, to try and break the Lanteans' lines. And all while the Wraith were amassing their forces, the Lanteans make several breakthroughs with each project. The first is the evolution of the nanites into nanomorphs, not what the Lanteans intended. They soon realized the nanomorphs' new potential and reprogrammed them, removing the aggression towards the Wraith, and programmed them to help aid the Lanteans in shipbuilding and construction, seeing how quickly they can build, and used them as infiltrators behind enemy lines on the Wraith worlds to enact sabotage. This move increased the Lanteans' forces again to 3 times what it was, and with the guerrilla warfare and sabotage happening on Wraith worlds, the Wraith planned offensive stalled. The Wraith began growing more desperate while struggling to build up their forces and maintain their food supply. But as the Wraith held more territory than the Lanteans at this point in the war, the Wraith still had a 4-to-1 advantage over the Lanteans in ships, and began to start a series of strikes on the Lantean key worlds. But as the Lanteans have increased their defences as well, the Wraith took many losses in these attacks, more than they could sustain, and withdrew their forces back to prevent more losses. The next project the Lanteans were working on saw much promise, named Project Arcturus. The Lanteans had successfully created a superior power source to that of the ZPMs, but due to the creation of exotic particles breaching containment and causing many overloads, the Lanteans could only sustain the generation of 0-point energy for a short time, and with the issue of the exotic particles being hard to overcome, the Lanteans decided to keep working on the project, but to put it to the back of the line and begin to focus more on the ZPM constructions instead for the fleet, as that became more immediate. The project would continue on, but for the purpose of my what if, it was never solved. And the last project being called the Atera device. This project was overseen directly by Janus. The device was built and complete, and in theory would work by destabilizing the Wraith's hyperdrive subspace frequency, causing any Wraith ship to be destroyed upon entering hyperspace. With the Council's permission, the device was activated for a test, and with many cloaked puddle jumpers spying on the Wraith's fleets around the galaxy, reports of the Wraith ships being destroyed started to come in, showing the device was working. But just before the test, the Wraith launched an assault on a minor Lantean world, and so the Lanteans on that world prepared for an evacuation and dialed the Stargate. The Lanteans' computer immediately detected the energy buildup within the Stargate, heading for an overload, and one of the Lanteans, seeing the end, sent out a distress signal, sharing what was happening. And then, boom, the Stargate explodes, destroying the entire Lantean facility and surrounding area of the planet. The Wraith in orbit was shocked seeing this, believing the Lanteans destroyed their own base over it being taken. But this was not the case, as multiple reports started coming in from other worlds of Stargates exploding. Janus quickly put 2 and 2 together and quickly shut down the Atera device and began to go over the data. The data revealed that the device worked as intended, but due to the Wraith using the same subspace frequency as the Stargates, it caused the Stargates to explode. Undeterred, Janus had a plan. He approached the Council and the many fleet commanders and proposed a final plan to win the war against the Wraith. His plan was to use the Atera device to keep the Wraith from moving around the galaxy, and use the Lanteans' fleet to systematically attack the Wraith and destroy their fleets. The plan would need the entire Stargate network to be offline, and all strategic materials and logistics to be ship transported instead of through the Stargate. The Council, tired of the 50 plus years of being on the defensive, losing over half the galaxy to the Wraith, agreed to this plan that Janus proposed, and preparations began. The plan would take several months to enact, moving all the pieces into place, all while the Wraith engaged in several large-scale attacks on the Lantean worlds, with the Lanteans only just holding the line. But eager to fight, several ship captains grew overconfident, and the Lanteans took several losses during this time, but nothing too great to affect the overall plan. So pushing on to 60 years of war with the Wraith, while the preparations for the Atera device plan was in the works, the Lanteans finally activated the Atera device and trapped the Wraith in place. The Lanteans' fleets then began to leave their defensive positions of their key worlds for the first time in almost 60 years to engage the Wraith, and over the next 20 years, the Lanteans, relying solely on ship travel, reclaimed lost worlds and destroyed over 70% of the Wraith forces, leaving the Wraith starving and stranded. The only refuge left for the Wraith was their main worlds, and so the Lanteans, tired of war, a small group of the Council began pushing for peace with the Wraith, and so with the Wraith trapped and the Lanteans decided to try diplomacy instead of genocide, but the Wraith did not listen. They destroyed the envoy and sealed their fates. The Lanteans, realizing that talk was not an option, threw everything they had at the remaining Wraith worlds, and after 90 years of war, the last Wraith Queen was killed, ending the Wraith threat once and for all, leaving the Lanteans victors in the galaxy. They turned off the Atera device after the war and resumed gate travel. The Lanteans, tired of the almost century-long war, decided to focus on rebuilding their empire and returned to their key worlds, where they began to focus on themselves and the path of ascension. But not all Lanteans wanted to walk the path, so the Lantean society split, with those who wanted to walk the path and those who wanted to continue on. And so, the Lanteans entered a new age, being the most powerful faction in multiple galaxies. Before I continue, I just want to point out that in my scenario, the Lanteans are still the same old Lanteans, but instead of their overconfidence and arrogance, they realised the threat of the Wraith and their numbers and reorganised their military and tactics for defence while building up their forces, not allowing the Wraith to take their key worlds. This immediate change in their ways allowed the Lanteans to hold the line and give them time to grow their fleets and resources. This defensive posture still allowed the Wraith to spread out around the galaxy, but with the Wraith not acquiring the ZPMs from the Lanteans' overconfidence like in the canon timeline, the Wraith never overwhelmed the Lanteans, keeping the fighting mostly balanced. When it comes to the 3 projects, I allowed the replicators to survive and be reprogrammed to construction and infiltrators instead of being destroyed, showing the Lanteans to adapt to the situation rather than what happened before. But I limited the replicators on purpose because I don't want the replicators to be used to fight the Wraith like they do in the canon timeline, as that's future knowledge and the Lanteans would not know their full capabilities, so assigning the replicators to construction and infiltration would be, in my opinion, something that would happen. With Project Arcturus, I basically kept it the same, but without the catastrophic overload that killed the Lantean scientists and the planet's population. As the Lanteans were not in a hurry, they took their time with the project, but could not overcome the exotic particles, leaving the project unfinished. And so it was not an impacting factor in the war, as unlimited power would be crazy. And lastly, the Otero device. Now, with Janus leading the Science Council, he created the project in the open, this time with the High Council's blessing, and so the Lanteans all knew of the device and its intended function. So when the device was tested, the effects were seen by all, but instead of shutting down the device and walking away, Janus would have pushed to use the device and shut the gate network down to protect it. This would create a logistic nightmare for the Lanteans, but it would be possible. So with the required prep time, the Otero device was the endgame, and because I've allowed the Lanteans to keep their key worlds of shipbuilding and resource gathering, the Lanteans would have had enough ships to begin the systematic destruction of the Wraith that are now unable to jump to hyperspace. But as the Wraith are everywhere, this would be a long campaign, ultimately ending in the decision to find a diplomatic end, as the Lanteans probably didn't want to do genocide. But knowing the Wraith, I doubt they would have even entertained it, and so the Lanteans, left with no other choice, ended it. The Lanteans would then begin to revert to their pre-war society, and most of them would begin to walk the path of ascension like in the canon timeline, but others like Janus would want to continue on. So this next part, this would be the continuation of the what if after the war, and how the Lantean survival would change everything drastically in both the Pegasus and the Milky Way galaxies. So let's go. So after the war, the Lanteans in Pegasus would be the dominant faction with a presence everywhere. Human worlds would gain from the Lanteans and prosper and grow quickly, with many reaching an industrial age within the first few centuries, with some even reaching space travel, allowing the humans in the Pegasus galaxy to spread out with the Lanteans' oversight and guidance. I would imagine though a few human worlds would seek power and enter conflict with other human worlds, but the remaining Lanteans would intervene and maintain order. The Lanteans would continue to use the replicators and integrate them into the Lantean society, after realizing the replicators are sentient. The Lanteans in Pegasus would continue to advance, possibly even perfecting Project Arcturus, and over time probably leave the Pegasus galaxy to explore other galaxies once the humans of the Pegasus galaxy didn't need them, leaving the humans in Pegasus to inherit the Lanteans' mantle. Over in the Milky Way galaxy, the Lanteans who sought ascension would probably return to Earth and reunite with the Asgard and discover the gold threat. They would aid the Asgard in dealing with the Goa'uld by informing the Pegasus Lanteans of this new threat. This would enact the Lanteans in Pegasus to send ships to the conflict, as the Lanteans would still have a pretty large force in this timeline, and with the Lanteans' involvement, it would only be a short time with the Asgard as allies to defeat the Goa'uld, freeing the galaxy from the Goa'uld far sooner than in canon, changing so much it's impossible to know what. And after the Goa'uld were beaten, the Lanteans seeing how primitive the humans of Earth are, the Lanteans will probably do the same as before, with interbreeding and guiding seeds of civilization, and then leave Earth and walk the path of ascension elsewhere, allowing Earth to develop on their own. And this would impact human history drastically, given the Stargate probably wouldn't be buried, and that the Goa'uld would not have spread humans around the galaxy. There are so many variables to account for in this scenario, but with the Goa'uld gone thousands of years ago, all the events of SG-1, Atlantis and SGU would not happen, and I could go on down this massive rabbit hole of various scenarios from this one change, but there is far too many unknowns in this scenario as you reach the present day, that even trying to think what it would be like would be hard, as I'm finding it here. So I am going to end this what if here before we get lost in all the possibilities. But what do you think? Let me know what you think would happen if the Lanteans won the bloody Wraith. I'll try again. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think would happen if the Lanteans won the war with the Wraith. No answer is too crazy. Go nuts. Well, there we go, my fellow nerds. This has been my first what if scenario in Stargate, and it was not easy trying to create a logical way for the Lanteans to win the war against the Wraith. So I hope my scenario makes sense and the changes I made seem logical. I wanted the Lanteans to win, and so I had to rig the situation for it to happen, but reading back through my what if, the Lanteans in my opinion could have won, or at least had a stalemate with the Wraith in the canon timeline if they did some of my changes, instead of being the overconfident and arrogant ancients we've come to know. But hey, this is my what if. I can change what I like as long as it makes sense. So I hope you all enjoyed this what if, and if you would like to see me do more what ifs, please do comment your ideas below for a what if. But this what if was inspired by Ethan in the comments, so shout out to Ethan. Thank you, Ethan, you've inspired me to do this what if. And if everyone else enjoyed the content, please feel free to like, comment and subscribe for more. I have been your host, Dr. McKay. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Cheers and goodbye, and have a good rest of your day.